Hello everyone, it's Monica and welcome back to my channel. Well, today we're going to be creating a sympathy card. And while I don't often create sympathy cards, I felt that I really needed to create one for one of my crafty friends who recently lost a loved one. Losses are always hard, but they're especially hard when they're sudden and unexpected. I've had this friend for several years now, and I actually met her through the crafty community. She's a dear friend of mine, and I wanted to be able to send her something to let her know I was thinking of her. So I wanted this card to be pretty but subtle. I didn't want to over embellish it like I typically do on my cards, but I wanted to be able to make it just pretty enough to let her know that I'm thinking about her and something that hopefully will bring some solace to her hardship she's going through currently. I recently did a live on YouTube where I introduced these rub-on transfers from 49 and Market. And these rub-ons I felt were perfect because I could easily add them to a one-layer card and they would be beautiful on their own. I wanted to make sure I had enough white space where I can stamp my sympathy sentiment as well. So the sympathy sentiment that I'm using is from Kaiser Craft, and I've actually never used it before. But these sympathy statements are small enough where they're not going to overtake the card, but they'll certainly relay my message. So 49 and Market had some really pretty rub-ons, and the two that I decided to purchase and try out were these floral ones that were called, I want to say, Blush and Sage. And then I got another couple of rub-ons as well that are more of a vacation or travel theme. These pink flowers were perfect because they are bunched together and they fit perfectly onto an A2 card. So to use these rub-ons, all you need to do is lift up your first sheet and place it over the cardstock that you want to adhere it to. Now, if you want to be safe, you could certainly cut out this rub-on so that way none of the additional rub-ons that are around the image that you're going to be using tack to the paper. But I was really careful about this, and I made sure that I held up part of the paper so that all of the images aren't necessarily touching my white paper. And then I take the stylus tool that also comes in the package to gently rub on the images that I want to adhere to my cardstock. Now, you don't have to put very much pressure onto these rub-ons to be able to get them to adhere to your paper. They actually came off pretty easily. I just wanted to make sure that I held up my paper so, like I said, part of the other images that were attached to the sheet did not adhere to my white cardstock. And then as I rubbed off the portion of the image that I wanted to stick, I gently lifted the paper to make sure it did have good adhesion onto my white cardstock. And then once all of the image was adhered to the white cardstock, I was able to easily just lift it up, and then I had a finished card. Now, I knew I wanted to add a sentiment, so when I was placing down these rub-ons, I made sure that I left some white space on the bottom to be able to add my sentiment. I did have some white space also towards the top right and the left side, but I didn't think that my sentiment would fit onto the left or the right side, so the bottom part of the card was the perfect choice to add my sentiment. Now, as you can see, there is some white space, like I said, on the top right and on the left side. And I'm going to come back in just a bit and I'm going to add another butterfly. But this gave me a couple of options to add my sentiment. So once I had my image exactly the way that I wanted to go ahead and use my Misty stamping platform because I wanted to make sure that I didn't make any mistakes on stamping my sentiment. Like I said, ordinarily I do use a layer to adhere to the base of my card. So that way if I mess up, then I don't mess up the whole card. But because this typically, or essentially I should say, is the card, I wanted to make sure that I had a perfect sentiment stamped the first time. So on this little sentiment stamp set from Kaiser Craft, I had 4 choices. And I ended up just going with a very simple one that said, with sympathy. Now on my Misty platform, you're going to see I have a white piece of sticky grid, and this is something that I introduced to you in an earlier video that I'm trying out with my Misty. This sticky grid will hold my white paper in place, and ordinarily that's enough. But because I actually have a folded card here, I felt that I had to actually add the magnet as well. So you're going to see when I go to use my stamp platform, not only do I have my sticky grid where I lay my card on, but I'm also going to bring in a magnet just to hold down the top portion of the card. So once I added my card to my Misty stamping platform, then I went ahead and I took the sentiment and I determined where I was going to put it. Ultimately, I ended up deciding to put it at the bottom of the card. But I noticed when I was going to place my stamp that because this is a fold over card, it's not just the top layer, that I might have some problems stamping it twice if I find the need to do that. So I went ahead and I added my little magnet to hold the flap down, and then I placed my stamp on the bottom of the card. Now for the color of my sentiment, I decided to go with the Distress Oxide color Crushed Olive because I felt that it matched the leaves perfectly on this. And again, I didn't want anything very bold. I didn't want to go black. I just wanted it to be very subtle because that was really what I was going for here. Like I said in the beginning, I don't often make sympathy cards because it's just a difficult time, and sometimes I wonder if they even make a difference. But for this friend, because she is a crafty friend, I just wanted to let her know I was thinking of her. I didn't want to necessarily send her a Facebook message. I know she's probably getting inundated with lots of emails and condolences. And while I know that they're helpful, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. At least I think about if I had a loss in my family, how overwhelmed I would be. You know, we all have good intentions, but I just wanted to give her space just in the event she needed just some time to kind of figure out what's going on, because I just can't even imagine what she's going through. So that is why ultimately I decided to create this sympathy card, just so I can let her know that I am definitely thinking about her and she's in my thoughts and prayers. So once I had my stamped sentiment, I decided I wanted to add one more little image on that white space on the left-hand side, just to fill in that gap. And then once I finished adding that extra butterfly, I pretty much felt the card was complete and it was ready for me to write my message. But after looking at the card a little bit more, I decided that I did want to mute the white background just a little bit. So I pulled out my pink spun sugar distress ink, and I just lightly added some pink to the background. I wanted to just add a little bit burst of color, nothing too again, I didn't want it to be in our face. I just wanted to add a little bit more color just to kind of frame the background. And then with that, my card was definitely complete. So after I wrote the message in the card, I decided I really wanted to create a matching envelope for this card. So I went through my paper stack, and I have a lot of 12 by 12 paper I'm trying to get through, and I decided to create my own envelope. So I found some paper that I thought matched the card perfectly. It had florals on it, and it had that green, that really light green that I thought would match the card perfectly. So I pulled out the cardstock as well as my envelope punch, and I sized a piece of paper 8 inches by 1 1/8 inch to create an A2 envelope. And then I used the dimensions on my envelope punch to score and punch the notches to create my envelope. Now, if you don't have an envelope punch, I highly recommend it. I use this envelope punch all the time. It's wonderful because it has the measurements right on the punch board, so you can make different size envelopes. And in a pinch, if you don't have an A2 envelope, you can easily put one together. I love also that you can create matching envelopes for a card, just to have a finishing touch. So once I had the paper cut out, scored and notched, I went ahead and got my 3-in-1 beacon to glue down my envelope. And now I'm going to work on the front. So sometimes our designer paper is a little bit too busy to be able to write an address on it. So I just took some white cardstock and sized it down, rounded the corners so that way I can write the address right on it. So like I said, I went ahead and I sized this down, and I want to say that I just took off about 1/2 inch to make the length of it 2.5 inches, I want to say. But really, I just kind of eyeballed it to make sure that I had enough room to be able to write the address. And then once I had it sized down, I went ahead and I rounded the corners, and I added a little bit of that spun sugar pink distress ink just to coordinate it with my rub-ons that I'm going to be adding. Then once I had it sized perfectly, I went ahead and I glued it down using my 3-in-1 beacon. And then I got my rub-ons that I just used for the card to be able to add it to the left bottom side of the card just to have it match. So while this card was difficult to prepare just for the fact of what it wasn't a difficult card to make. I used these rub-ons, which were my focal point for not only my card but for my envelope, and it created a really beautiful, subtle sympathy card. But I also think that these rub-ons could be used for a more joyous occasion as well. These rub-ons are perfect for spring cards, for travel cards. I just love them, and I'm just so glad that I discovered them with the 49 and Market company. They have some wonderful vintage-inspired paper, and I'm really glad that I was able to try out these rub-ons and add them to my craft stash. So hopefully I've given you an idea on how to create a simple sympathy card, but not only that, on how to use these rub-ons for some simple spring cards. If you're interested in seeing another video that I used these rub-ons, I'll make sure that I link it below for you. And I used these during a YouTube live to alter some playing cards. All right, everybody, I hope that you've enjoyed this process of creating this card and the matching video. And if you've enjoyed my video, I'd sure appreciate a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you head out. All right, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.